but I suggest that we start our session with Tom Van Der Lubbe. The topic today is how to prevent layoffs. What's the alternative? Together with me today is from the Next Gen Net, Luc Breton, my partner, and Nili Poisson, and Zara, our intern as well. She's with us today. Tom, warm welcome to you today. So maybe just a few words of we heard as well that you were one of the pioneers of a holacracy company in the finance sector of Netherlands. What brought you to adopt holacracy?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. What brought us to holacracy? A very simple answer. When we started the company as entrepreneurs, we started because we didn't want to micromanage ourselves. So we thought it's not a good idea when the company became bigger to micromanage other people. So that is the main reason, I think, for doing this.
Yeah, and in holacracy and in self-organization, purpose is so important. Can you tell us what is your personal purpose of, or what do you like serve as a company?
The purpose of the company is a double one. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, change finance or the financial industry, and on the other hand, change work by putting people first. So that's the whole discussion about, let's say, multi-stakeholder hierarchy. And my personal purpose is probably pretty linked to that because I like both purposes. But I think it also has to do with, let's say, finding back to a more humane way of working together.
Wonderful. And change finance, what is behind that? Like, what is the purpose that underlies there?
No, I mean, you don't have to work in finance to know that, let's say, the whole topic of behavior of financial industry, if you just take the last financial crisis, was not very glamorous, to put it very euphemistically. So let's say, in a way, the financial industry is a kind of fundament under the whole economy. So financial industry should have a kind of semi-public responsibility for others to be able to do business, or for private people to reach their goals, which is something different of what we are seeing now in the financial industry.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for your short intro. Let me just quickly show my screen. Can you see the screen here?
Yeah, I see the paintings.
So you see the picture, and I welcome all our public to this speak today. Tom, you will be talking about avoiding layoffs. Companies that treat their people best in bad times emerged as winners in the past. That is the topic of your talk. And here we would like to love and thank our partners that are supporting us in the Next Gen Net as well to reprogram the summit that is postponed. And we are planning it actually for November, so that this will really take place in Paris. And we are as well proud that we already found 2 partners that support this format so that you can all profit from this. It's Hola Spirit and Fabric. Thanks a lot. And if I'm not wrong, somebody from Fabric is today with us in the audience. So a warm welcome and thanks a lot for being part of us. And yeah, what will we do? We are in the middle of the introduction, and Tom will talk about his topic for about 15 minutes, and we will have some questions that we share. And we plan to have you in a breakout session so that you can discuss the topic. So what is your opinion about layoffs and of what you've just heard from Tom, so that at the end of this session, we can do question and answer and sharing your ideas and what you've just discussed. So that's the plan for today. And I'd just like to add a few sentences. So we do have different formats that are virtual. the one that we are experiencing today is Thrive In. It's inspirational talks that we are planning to have every week. And now we are starting into the summer break after this session. Brain Grain is the virtual open space that we have done in April, and we will reprogram this like quarterly. Less Series is like experiencing new and different formats, like Lego Series Play is on our plan, and we will reschedule it as well for September. And the summit that will take place finally, and let's cross our fingers that Corona is not doing us the same as in spring, that we will have it actually in November. Yeah, now I am glad to pass the word to Tom, and I just stopped sharing my screen. One moment.
I shall try then to share mine.
Second, I'm just hiding my own command box. Yes. So I pass the word to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I hope it works out with the presentation. Yeah, the let's say the start of the whole thing was the article I wrote in on the blog of Corporate Rebels, where I wanted to make a point of saying we should try to avoid layoffs in these times of crisis, and there were quite some reactions, probably because of the area we live in. So I want to dive a little bit into this deeper. I will do a very short introduction, then say something about what we call the golden rule, then something about scenario planning, and then the different ways of, let's say, dealing with layoffs, and then a last remark on leadership. Visie, I mean, it's not so important for the presentation, but just very short info. We do mortgage advice, founded 10 years ago, 40 people more or less, 7,500 mortgages, which means 2.5 billion. And it's just a normal mortgage for normal people. So it has nothing to do with private wealth, or it's just a very normal, small company, so to say. If people know our company, it could be that because of our, let's say, awards we got. We're #1 great place to work in the Netherlands, 2019 and 2020, and also on the European list. And then we a lot of growth awards, but it's mainly about this people first topic. And that's why I wanted to mention this. And we always had this model, you see, which starts with the purpose. And then if you talk about the hierarchy of stakeholders, it's always about putting your own people first, before clients and before your shareholders, which is something which we had to explain often before the crisis, but and now in Corona crisis, everybody talks about solidarity, and you have this topic of do you lay off your people or not? And from our point of view, you start with your own people. So this is the model we also had before the crisis. The main rule we don't have big handbooks. We only have one rule, and that's the golden rule, which you can find in any religion, or it's also in philosophy, which means just treat others like you want to be treated yourself. And that's something which you can apply no matter in what area. So if it's about customers or your own people, or let's say people you work together with in your whole network, it always is the same. And we wanted to keep it very simple, because if you write a lot of stuff down, people say, I don't find it in the handbook. It's a little bit like tax regulation, where people always search for, is there a kind of rule and where is it written down? Although we know where paying taxes, where it is all about. So that's the main rule. And suddenly, in times of crisis, people are much focusing on this topic of solidarity, because probably people fear themselves that they will be laid off, And I just put, let's say, three ways of seeing this. Um, I already talked about golden rule, which you have in religion, etc., and philosophy, but we also know it more or less from the Maslow pyramid, where you talk about security, or nowadays we talk a lot about psychological safety, Amy Edmondson. So there are a lot of common understanding that you need a kind of security to be productive, and it makes sense also from a human point of view. And then if the crisis came, we said, okay, the first thing should be very clear that this hierarchy of stakeholders is unchanged in our model. So we said the main goal of our company during this crisis is to keep anybody on board, to get through this crisis. And in this hierarchy of stakeholders, we said, okay, as shareholders will when it's necessary, we'll put money into the company. So that's the other way around. So shareholders, if it's about the hierarchy of obligations, they should act first. That also can be, for instance, that they don't pay themselves their salaries if they don't have to as owners, which we did, for instance, in the past in another crisis. So you want to create this kind of psychological safety because of the fact that everybody fears or has this fear of perhaps losing somebody's jobs. And then the next topic is to be very transparent. We also have this principle of radical transparency, that you show how much cash do you have. So everybody knows what's going on, and you don't have a lot of discussions which take place, because they always will take place, because people will ask each other in a company, how much money do we have? Do you know how for how many months the company will be able to pay the salary? So those discussions will always be there. So better try to keep them public and try to be in the lead in this discussion. So we always had the situation that people know about how much money we do have in the company. And then we took the worst case scenario and said, okay, we can survive so many months. And if it wouldn't be enough, if we have zero revenue, we will add money as shareholders into the company. So this kind of psychological safety was there in the crisis, so everybody could just continue to work. So the positive outcome is, then if you have a worst case scenario, it only can become better, because you don't have zero revenue, or you get support, etc. So you have after this worst case scenario, you only have positive news. And if you do it the other way around, you say no, we just think we only will lose 10% revenue, and it's worse, then you are communicating negative news all the time, and that's not very good for the morale. So after the first week, people already said, now it's going much better than the worst case scenario we have. Now about layoffs. For those who read the article where I dive deeper into this, you have in the end three ways of dealing with this crisis. The American way is the exocyte, CFO type of reaction. So before even something happens, you lay off people as fast as possible, with the idea that if you cut cost as fast as possible, that the chance of surviving is the highest. But that's not the case. So the European model is much more useful, and already also has done a lot of research on this, that you try to, for instance, instead of, let's say, laying off 20 or 30% of the people, you just take a collective decision and say, okay, shall we all work less for this certain percentage, and then just see how it goes, but you don't lay off people. And then the third part is the even more intelligent approach, that you decentralize this discussion, so that you give the authority, and then it's about self-organization. You give the authority to the teams to find out even more intelligent solutions. So these are the three strategies you have, and this American strategy is something which dominates the discussion all the time, because companies are mainly managed at the moment by shareholder value driven, let's say, ways of thinking. and those external shareholder values, they call their CFOs, and those CFOs, they react more or less instinctively. So the tougher you react and the more people you lay off, the more credits you get from your external shareholders. That's what's happening, and then you have this kind of hire and fire culture, or this Excel stuff, and the whole discussion is then focused on who has to be laid off. Is it last in, first out, or do it in another way? And in the European way, you have this let's say way of multi-stakeholder driven. You see, there's a temporary measure. The role of the state is much stronger. It's more solution for everybody. It's a collective stuff, and you try not to lose productivity. And what's interesting for those people who want to dive into this deeper, I found in research of the IMF, which is not a left-wing organization or a trade union, where they even don't translate the German word Kurzarbeit, which means that you don't lay off the people, but everybody has shorter work time. So for those people who are interested in this, especially because there is a lot of research done on former crises, where they just show you with data that those companies in continental Europe who took this policy just had even a higher chance of surviving, which in a way is understandable because you keep up the morale and you keep up your productivity. So for people who are interested, I put a link on that. The more collective approach is even much more interesting, because if you have a decentralized decision-making process going on, which you have in self-organizing teams, people start to discuss. So you have people who say, okay, I can't reduce 30% because I need my whole salary, and other people will say I can go reduce 50% because I have enough money, or I have a partner who earns a lot of money, etc. And you have this solidarity on a very small scale in a team. So it's much easier to create solidarity if you know somebody. So the chance of creating solidarity in a company is much higher when you give people in teams the power to organize those, let's say, those decisions themselves, and you keep up the productivity. And for those people who like this, there's one a good book written on this, especially for the Americans, Bob Chapman, who just says just see everybody as a family, and as he did this in his company for a long time. It's not that you're talking about theory; it's just put into practice. So the conclusion would be, and I also took Simon Sinek for people who, just to avoid that you think it's only European topic. I like the quote: "Great leaders are willing to sacrifice the number to save the people, and poor leaders sacrifice the people to save the numbers." And that would be my conclusion for this short introduction.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tom. That was really wonderful. Thanks for this input. And what if I can start with my first question I'm burning? So I clearly see the link of how you deal with the crisis to your purpose, to put people first. So that is really guiding you in the way on how you treat the people in the company. And what I was interested in to hear is like, so I guess that you used the third method to decentralize the question. How did you do it concretely at VZ?
Yeah, we thought in the beginning of the crisis that we would be hit rather severely, but we weren't until now.
Mhm.
So we already have this in place. So for instance, also if people are hired, then it's a decision of the team themselves. So, but we didn't have to lay off anybody.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is just if you do it in this way, just give the people the chance of coming up with better ideas. And then, I mean, if there aren't any ideas, so because there are certain companies or certain industries where you can't avoid layoffs, but at least you have activated the whole collective intelligence of your whole company.
Mhm. And have you already done this exercise yet in the company at VC to like really call the collective intelligence?
Yeah, we're doing all the time because we have implemented holacracy. So everybody is just, let's say, acting in in his own roles, and we went remote with the whole company, but we don't have severe cuts until now. So or a negative influence on our revenue, but we still think that perhaps after summer, also the whole mortgage market will be hit by a recession. So we still are in a kind of recession modus, just waiting for it to happen. But we have, let's say, our strategy and our whole processes in place.
Yeah, wonderful. I have another other question based on your worst case scenario that you are talking about. So you have done that now for Corona as well. That
Mhm.
together with the team, you have established this
And
work.
but we already had it before.
Yeah,
So we already thought there would be a crisis,
yeah,
and then we just said, okay, if we would think that our revenue, if we would lose half of our revenue, what is the scenario?
mhm,
So what I find interesting as an entrepreneur is that we most of the time we're only talking about good times,
mhm,
although we know that half of the time it's about surviving in bad times. I
mhm,
mean, it's as old as the Bible, the seven easy years and the seven difficult years. So you always should have scenarios in place. I mean, we didn't expect, let's say, the Corona crisis, but we thought since a couple of years the economy is booming for a long time. We have to, we need to have a recession scenario in place. And
mhm.
then we said, because we're so small, we have less than 1% market share. We have a good chance of surviving because we are so small.
Yeah. And when you do this, like when you establish a scenario, is it happening like with people in their roles, and then you would share it with the company, or is that as well an act of like gathering all together and then you establish the scenario so that this psychological magic can happen of like having better numbers or better results than what you have expected worst? How does it happen when you do it?
At the moment or in general?
Yeah, like in general, like how would you do it?
Let's say in general, it's always a combination of decentralized discussion making, or let's say just working in the business and taking the decisions in a decentralized way. But if you, for instance, have to add up stuff, we have a once a week town hall, and you have to just the
Yeah,
normal structure of holacracy, where let's say the tensions are just brought through the whole system.
yeah, yeah. You would not then gather, like you would treat it in a town hall meeting, this kind of worst case scenario or something, where you gather with the whole crew.
Yes, but it also is a role. So I mean, we have a finance role or we have a CFO role, and
Yeah,
then it's the responsibility of this role to create these kind of scenarios.
yeah,
So for those who are interested in this topic, our Glassrock structure is open also for external people. So you can just go into Visi and then finance Glassrock, and there are roles for this kind of topics.
yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we discussed beforehand, Tom, that we would actually ask a question to the team or to our listeners that you have a chance to discuss it. So, what do you suggest that should be discussed? The question.
Uh, I think I sent you, but I don't remember it anymore. But I would say what I'm curious is how 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 I mean I would think that most entrepreneurs, especially of small companies, have a big solidarity. But I really don't know if there is, let's say, if there's much more solidarity in small companies versus the big ones. So that would be something which I find interesting. And the other thing which I find interesting is that in times of crisis, things become clearer. And I have the impression that, let's say, people realize much more that it's more about, let's say, being more humane and searching for a kind of, talking about next generation enterprises. So perhaps the crisis is also a chance of seeing things more clearly.
Yeah.
I'm curious if what other people think about this.
Yeah, so what we will do next actually is that we will take this chance to have a discussion in breakout rooms. We will do about 6 breakout rooms. That means that you can discuss this question about what is your approach regarding layoffs, and what Tom just said, like how does it show, and is it small companies mainly that show more solidarity, or how is it in your company? And it happens like this. I will do a scenario that so you will meet 3 other people in a breakout session, and you will have 15 minutes to, first of all, present yourself and to discuss this question, or just what you have heard. And as soon as I'll send you a message, and you will see it on the top of your screen, that the session ends in 30 seconds, you can accept it or just wait, and you would be transferred back to the plenary. So what I'll do now is to transfer all of you into a breakout room, and I just ask you to accept this, and I wish you enjoyable discussions. And I set a timer, 15 minutes, so latest in 15 minutes you would all be coming back. You're invited to accept to go to the breakout session. So
Yeah.
perfect. So I think everybody's back, and I'm of course very curious about what you have discussed. Since we're a little group, I invite you to just unmute your micro, and I'll meanwhile stop the music so that we can hear you better. So, what has happened in your discussion? Who would like to share what you discussed, the question that we had? So just unmute your mic and please feel free to share with us parts of what you have discussed.
So I will begin. In my group, we took the example of Sanofi announcing layoffs at the end of the crisis, while in the same time having benefit from this crisis in terms of sales for medicine. So it sounds weird in terms of timing, at least to make this kind of announcement. And the question we had was, what could put some pressure on this kind of organization led by financial short-term assessment to change their behavior? Because at the same time, they have net profit that are significant, and probably they could have managed it differently. And I'm a liberal, so I'm not telling you that I want to change the economy as a whole, but the question was, to finish with my question, is it at the stakeholder level that we can change things to put the pressure at the right place, or can we rely on the consumption to change? I'm not sure about it. What do you think of it, Tom? And if someone wants to add something, it's a pleasure.
I think it's you see it in a lot of countries, and I think in the long run it will not work. So if you just see companies who survive in the long run, it should be more than just maximizing your profits. So if you, for instance, are in the pharmacy, your purpose has to be to cure people, because otherwise you will just not survive, and that's something which in research you can find. I think I mentioned in the article also the book of Arie de Geus, and he did scenario planning for Shell, and Shell is also not a left-wing organization. So they did research on longevity of companies, and the companies who survive longer than 100 years, they are purpose oriented, and people want to work for purposeful companies. So I think depending on what time frame you see this discussion, in the end, the purposeful companies will survive. At least I hope.
Yeah, I think this point about the purpose, I will put it another way, is that it's when I read one of the Japanese guy, I don't know, it's Masaki Imai, another one, who said that the objective is not the profit. The profit is only a consequence, a sanction. You know, you do something, and you will be sanctioned, will give you profit or not. But the main thing is to do the things the best you can. And you can refer to another guy from Nagoya, Toyoda, was saying that you have to really do the best of you can do. And if you make profit, it will be the return, but not the objective. And that's the main difficulty of people, is that they just look at the profit. They want to cash the money. But sorry, guys, you have to work a little bit before. And if you do well, maybe you get some money. And that's this, and that's one of the aspects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is wonderful. Thanks a lot for sharing. Is there other things that you have discussed that you would like to share with the crowd, or a question that you have to Tom that is with us today? Who would like to go next?
I think, Eduardo, your example of the team, the circle that decided to lower their wages is very interesting. If you could share it, perhaps, and have the insight of Tom on that. I think it's very insightful.
Yes, so please.
There's a company here in Brazil that's called Educa. That they are around 100 employees. That they ran Alacrity for over 3 years, and at this time they decided to lower the salaries by 25% for all employees and 50% for all founders and partners. And this decision was made through a circle that has the purpose to, I don't remember it exactly, but it takes care of people's partnership, not people's, and it has a role that's called founders and shareholders representative, and the other role that's called employees representative. And this decision was brought by the founders, but was taken through a integrative process with all the representatives from the employees.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Actually, I don't know how they regulate with the Brazilian laws, because in Brazil you cannot lower any salary, right? So I don't know exactly what they did about it, but it was it was made.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Eduardo. It's really very interesting. So curious to hear more. So what have you discussed in your groups? Who else has a question or wants to share what you've discussed? What is your conclusion? Can I ask you, Tom, what have you discussed in your group with the crew?
Yeah, we discussed more in general about how about these differences between countries, and also about companies, about the amount of liquidity. So as I live in Switzerland, I found it very interesting that, for instance, in the beginning of the crisis, entrepreneurs in Switzerland, but also southern Germany, said, if you're not able to pay the salaries of your company a couple of months, you're just a bad entrepreneur. So it's just a different way of seeing things. And then at the same time, I read about the liquidity of American small, medium-sized enterprises, and it was only a couple of weeks. So I think it's interesting to dive much deeper into the cultural differences. Because if I see in Switzerland, and also, I mean, I don't know enough about France, but I know about Germany pretty well. You have just those small and medium-sized enterprises, especially family-owned businesses, and they do a lot of things which people who studied economics find not very effective, because they don't leverage their capital. They don't want to have bank loans. They own the factory buildings as families. But if you take the whole concept of anti-fragile, they're surviving every crisis, because the goal is to survive the crisis. The goal is not in good times to maximize your profit. No, it's not who is the fastest on the 100-meter. No, it's about the marathon.
Yeah.
So I think the cultural differences is an interesting topic.
And has anybody spoken about France? Like, what is the approach in France? When you hear Tom talking about Switzerland and southern Germany, have you discussed it?
Yeah, Fatima.
Isabelle?
Okay, we have actually.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Let me know.
Because we were in a group with a French and American,
yeah.
And we talk about the law that makes it more difficult to fire people in France, but that is what we say is that it was in big company, because in smaller company it wasn't the same. And we also talked about the fact that holacracy is not how can I say that? Well, it's not because you run in holacracy that the human culture will be the same. Yeah. And so we had various examples around that. And we finally said that it was more a question of culture. And maybe in small companies, the culture might or might not be more toward the humans.
Yeah. Or then yeah, super. Thanks a lot for sharing this. It's interesting. Yeah, I agree with you that it's not holacracy that makes it. I am accompanying many companies on their way through to self-organization, and it's really a conscious decision, as Tom said, like in the purpose to say, like, okay, what do we serve? Is it and what DJ shared as well. So profit is a result of purpose and should not be a name in it all. Exactly. Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Isabelle. That's really interesting. Is there something else to add that was not discussed yet? I'm really curious to hear what you've discussed in your groups. If you have a question, otherwise, as well to Tom, and you're shy to ask it, then you can as well write it into the chat. Feel free to do so.
We'll ask another one to Tom. This ability you had at VC to anticipate the crisis and find the right scenario before the crisis happens. Is it due to high transparency you have put in your organization? I know that especially on salaries and compensation, you have done something incredible in terms of transparency. Is it mandatory to have this level of transparency, or could you manage to do the same even if the organization is not at the level you have at VC?
No, I really think these are two separate topics. I think transparency helps, but let's say if you have a very old-fashioned family-owned business of somebody who says I'm in for the long run, and is in a very conservative way financed, let's say without a lot of debt, without bank loans, and owning, let's say, the company building, because it's in the family since, I don't know, 150 years. I think it's more about this long-term way of thinking than it is about transparency. But let's say in modern times, I think it helps because people expect nowadays, especially the younger generation, that everything is shared because they are raised in a different kind of society.
Yeah. So since we are approaching towards the end, I would love to ask you, Tom, if there is a wish that you would like to pronounce in regards to that topic, layoffs, and if you had a magic stick, what would you do?
You ask me? If I would have a magic stick, I think until now, continental Europe is not doing so badly. Let's say on the one hand, Corona crisis, but also from an economic point of view. But I hope, because I'm very European, I hope that this crisis, which is a Corona crisis and also economic crisis, shows that our more continental European way of thinking is in the long run not so bad. So I think we should be a little bit more proud of our European roots and be a little bit more skeptical about all the American stuff we're consuming all the time.
Wonderful. I just Stefan, he raised his hand. Stefan Blackman, would you like to add in another question? Feel free to unmute your mic if yes. Stefan? No. So.
Hi there, sorry about that. I had a problem with my connection. That's a quick question. I've seen many hierarchy models that have been, not many, but few, but not that many yet, that have been using blockchain technology to facilitate the organization of their systems. Do you think it should have a place in the finance world as well? Blockchain for management for hierarchies.
Thanks for your question.
I mean, blockchain and also other, let's say, technological developments are always interesting. If it's about AI in general, etc. But let's say for this topic, I wouldn't see this as game changers. I mean, you could also organize a company without any IT if you have just, let's say, decentralized structures. So the whole idea of a circle and sitting together and using the talking stick is as old as history. So I think the basic principles of organizing and about solidarity, they are unchanged.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we have come to an end, and I'd like to thank you all, and basically, Tom, thank you very much that you have shared this moment with us. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. This was really wonderful. I take away a lot out of your talk. So thanks a lot. For those who want to listen some transition radio still before you leave, you can stay. I'll put some music on. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. You find the next events on the nextgenenterprise.com. You will see the next events. We will publish them there. So you'll find after the summer break, again, every week, inspirational talk and other events. So thank you very much, and I'll start with some music for you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You all. Okay.
Yeah, you can add a word if you want, huh, Tom.
Pardon?
You can say something if you want.
Yeah,
I thought you wanted to.
No, I hope that everybody will get through this crisis in a good way, because let's see, I feel pretty privileged that we're not hit that severely, but I can imagine that a lot of people are in a really difficult situation at this time. So good luck, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.